The chapter begins with a commentator saying that history is about to be made. A bodybuilder named Yu Hansel prepares to break the deadlift record, and the commentator says he wants to lift 10 tons. Hansel yells as he lifts the weights but suddenly loses consciousness and collapses. The commentator asks him if he is alright and calls for the medic to help him. Hansel slowly opens his eyes and wonders if he blacked out. A strange system creates skills around him, and he wonders why girls don't prefer muscular men. The system says he has become a legendary species, and he wakes up. Several chicken-like animals surround him, and he says he might be in hell because of all the chickens he ate. He uses a skill to examine the animals and sees they have a lot of protein. He catches the animal named Cock and eats it. Hansel wonders why he feels smaller and walks to a pond where he panics as he sees he has lost all his muscles. Hansel says he must avoid being an anchovy and rips a tree from the ground. He begins to squat and says effort doesn't betray. 3 months pass and Hansel laments because he didn't gain any muscle. He sees that he still has enough protein and decides to start afresh with the heart of a gym lover. Unknown to him, a giant cock stands behind him and stares at him. He screams as he turns around and runs as the monster roars. He wonders why the monster is attacking him and says he just wants huge muscles. He runs as he says the monster is dangerous but commends its chest muscles. Several cocks appear in front of Hansel as he runs, but he gets past them and apologizes. He activates a skill called Hawkeye and sees the monster has 12,000 kilos of protein. The system informs him he will receive a skill called Muscle Recovery if he eats the monster's breast, and Hansel turns around. He jumps on several trees and attacks the monster as his arm grows gigantic. The attack destroys the monster's head, and Hansel is happy because he can eat its breast. He roasts the monster that night and eats as several strange figures watch from the shadows. 3 ghouls watch Hansel as he eats. They lament because they haven't smelled meat in a long time and decide to ask Hansel for some. Hansel asks who they are, and they say they are ghouls from the Ali Mine region. They ask if he knows who defeated the giant monster named Kotatris, and he admits to killing it. The ghouls explain their situation, but Hansel isn't paying attention, and he wonders why their legs are so small. The ghouls say they need a favor from Hansel, but he asks them to repeat themselves for the 10th time. The ghouls decide to leave as they say Hansel won't help them, but Hansel asks them to eat with him. The ghoul walks to pick the meat, but Hansel sees it has a bad posture, and he yells at it, saying it will get injured if it deadlifts improperly. The ghoul doesn't know what he did wrong and apologizes to Hansel. He asks them if they know what a deadlift is, and they have no idea what he is talking about. Hansel remembers his teacher's saying, and his teacher says he should try teaching others if his muscles ever stop growing. Hansel takes the meat from the ghouls and says he will follow them after they eat. Hansel goes to the ghoul village the following day, and the ghoul lord welcomes him. He sees that the ghoul lord is obese and has thin limbs. The ghoul lord laughs as he tells Hansel not to worry about the ghouls. Hansel doesn't like him, and the ghoul lord says they are in trouble because he killed Kotatris. He realizes Hansel doesn't know what a skill is and summons the ghouls that brought him. The ghoul lord insults the ghouls and prepares to kill them for sinning against him, but Hansel stops him and negates his skill. He is confused because Hansel stopped his attack, but he says his skill allows him to multiply the weight of an object. He attacks Hansel again, but Hansel destroys the weapon and says he is shocked by the ghoul lord's personality. He grabs the ghoul lord's throat and asks if he thinks he is strong enough to decide if others live or die. Hansel then asks him what his big 3 are. The ghoul lord asks what the big 3 are. Hansel says it is the total weight of 3 major exercises. He realizes the ghoul lord doesn't know what it is, and a strength showdown begins. The ghoul lord stands in front of a weight of 200 kilos and uses his skill to make it lighter. He successfully lifts the weight, and Hansel asks the ghouls to watch and says he will make them do it if he wins. He begins to stretch as he prepares to deadlift, following the 3 accurate postures. The ghoul lord uses his skill to increase the weight, but Hansel picks it up and throws it in the air. The ghouls bow before him as they call him their new lord. The ghoul lord tells Hansel that he can return to his original world, but he decides not to because he looks like an anchovy. He decides to call the Ghoul Lord Ghoulord to avoid further confusion. They arrive at the training ground but see that there is no equipment. He orders the ghouls to stand in rows and says he will train them for 3 months so they can get strong bodies. Hansel instructs the ghouls and makes them do push-ups as warm-up. 3 hours pass and the ghouls are exhausted. They decide to stand up and Hansel yells at them for having terrible mentality. He asks if they are fine being the weakest race and says the best trainer can motivate others to exercise. The ghouls get motivated and continue working out as Hansel screams and says they are doing it to protect their families. The ghouls stop complaining and Hansel's Hawkeye levels up. 3 months pass and several lizard people prepare to attack the ghoul village. They rush towards the village, but Hansel gives the ghouls instructions and they drop rocks on them. The lizard people are shocked as they get attacked and wonder who is attacking. Hansel says the ghouls are no longer the weakest race and the ghouls are shredded. The ghouls drop rocks on the attacking lizard people. Their leader realizes they will be annihilated and decide to attack the ghouls' leader. He feels power from Ghoulord and tells him not to hide behind his subordinates. Ghoulord asks Hansel what he will do, and Hansel remembers his pet iguana, which was actually a crocodile. It could not bite his trained muscles, and he remembered what to do. Hansel attacks the leader of the lizard people and throws him to the ground. He recalls the next step, which is to intimidate the animal by letting it know who is stronger. Hansel tells the lizard man he is stronger and says it several times. The lizard man panics and immediately surrenders, and the ghouls celebrate. Meanwhile, in Werdo Duchy, Count Werdo commands some people to fulfill a mission and investigate the disappearance of Cocatris. The men leave the room and Werdo asks his general if the men will complete the task. The general talks about the warriors and says Leaper is known to taunt his opponent with his swordsmanship. Hendard uses strong and tough swordsmanship and his weapon is almost blunt. He says the innocent warrior named Blog follows the others because they are all friends. The trio walks through the woods, but a goblin prepares to shoot them with an arrow. Leaper moves behind it and kills it, and Blog informs them that hobgoblins are among the goblins. Leaper and Hendard prioritize Blog's safety, and Blog thanks them. They defeat the goblins, and Leaper argues with Hendard for putting Blog in danger. Blog wonders why he is weak when they all received the same training. He wonders how someone like him, weak and lacking talent, can get stronger and asks God for an answer. Meanwhile, Hansel and the ghouls force the lizard people to do exercise. The lizard people say they cannot continue, and Hansel tells the ghouls that the lizard people use the word can't. The ghouls say they don't have a choice, and they lift the lizard people's legs, forcing them to do plowing push-ups, and they start counting from 1. The lizard people scream in pain and wonder what the exercise means. The lizard people thank Hansel and the ghouls for everything as they prepare to leave. Hansel says they can come back if they want to train, but the leader of the lizard people says they aren't interested. The lizard people leave the village, and Hansel says he was surprised to see bodybuilders. He says muscles are torn during exercise and grow back as they heal. The central nervous system can get tired and decreases the capability of exercising. The body begins to deload, and the ghouls experience it during their 9th week of training. The ghouls stand beside Hansel and he realizes they are taller and bigger. He sees that they are improving and says they should prepare a meal. The ghouls ask if they can go hunting on their own and say they haven't killed any cook but have been moving them. Ghoulord wonders if the bodybuilders can surpass Hansel if they gather and apologizes for thinking like that. Hansel tells him not to worry and says he won't lose anyone in the deadlifting. The ghouls lunge as they walk through the woods and they ask Hansel if they have to do it. A ghoul suddenly breaks his ankle and clenches it as he is in pain. Meanwhile, Blog trains in the woods and says he is weak and unreliable. He says he wants to be strong so Leaper and Hendar don't have to worry about him. He continues training as he says he has to get stronger, but Leaper arrives and helps him. He says they have known about his secret training for a while and are hoping he becomes stronger. Hendard emerges and begins arguing with Leaper. He says they should rest so they won't be slow the following day, and they decide to rest. Blog tells them to prepare for battle and says the lizard people are approaching. They kill some lizard people, but their leader instructs them to ignore the humans and continue running. Several cooks pursue the lizard people, but the cooks are terrified as they run away from Hansel and the ghouls. Hansel doesn't notice that the food chain is going through some rapid changes, and he moves to the top. Hansel and the ghouls are stalking some cooks. Hansel asks the ghouls if they can capture the cooks and says their muscles look better than those of the ghouls. A cook gets stuck between two trees but uses its muscles to destroy them and continues moving. A ghoul stands up and goes in between two trees. He attempts to break them but cannot, and Hansel tells him to try again in 3 minutes. The ghoul continues trying but cannot break the tree, and Hansel tells him to come out. The ghoul talks to his friend and says the tree has deep roots. Hansel stares at him and says the bench press is in a multi-joint exercise and it is highly effective. He says their fast-twitch muscles were trained with various types of push-ups and wonders why they are unable to break the tree. Hansel sees the cooks stand beside each other and realizes what is wrong. He says the muscles gradually increased and he didn't notice. A ghoul asks him what is wrong, and he says it's his fault that the ghouls can't do what the cooks can. He says they are used to his routine and creates a cable machine for them. Hansel tells the ghouls that they will defeat the cooks if they do the cable exercise, and they get excited. He shows them how to perform cable cross and explains the important steps. He tells them he made more on the other trees and says it's their turn. Hansel says the gym lovers are cute and the ghouls gain bigger chests after exercising. They flex their chests and the cooks watch and get excited. They evolve into bigger animals, but the ghouls say they can handle them. The ghouls rush at the cooks and the cooks attack, and Hansel uses his Hawkeye. He sees that their body fat is 12% and their protein is 132 kilos. The cooks send the ghouls flying with a single attack. The system informs Hansel that the cooks evolve when they get excited and informs them not to excite them to stop their evolution. Ghoul Lord says guarding an empty house is boring. He says he is hungry and his taste in food is different from Hansel's. He begins to prepare his meal and prepares fried cook skin. He mixes it with several ingredients, fries it, and removes the golden goodies from the oil. Meanwhile, the ghouls are defeated by cooks and wonder why they can't win even after training. A ghoul screams and wonders what is wrong with him, but Hansel says there is a clear difference between the effort and time he put in and the chicken. Hansel asks the ghoul if he thinks he can defeat his enemy with limited training. He says achieving a chest like that of the cook isn't easy, but it doesn't mean he can't win. He says they must remember how they got to where they are, and the ghoul says they work together. They continue their training, and Hansel notices that the ghoul's spirits have improved, but he has to continue training. He says his minimum squat was 500 kilos, and they must train their roots. The ghouls obey his instructions and continue lunging. The ghoul tells Hansel that his source of strength is from the roots, and Hansel is happy with his realization. The ghoul prepares to attack, and Hansel asks him what he thinks will happen if he fights with his chest and legs. He rushes as the cook as Hansel watches, but they get knocked down. They continue wondering why they are losing, and Hansel says their legs are exhausted from the long journey. Hansel stands in front of the cooks, and they angrily attack him. He uses a move called one-arm dumbbell press against the attacking cooks. The leading cook sees its life flash before its eyes and sees from when it hatches to when it attacks Hansel. Hansel grabs the cook and returns to the town with the dead cooks. He tells the ghouls not to be harsh on themselves and says it's important that they've grown. He instructs them to eat and says they will try to catch the cooks themselves. They all celebrate with the food, but Hansel immediately instructs them to do 300 push-ups. Hansel tells the ghouls that they know they cannot surpass him. He tells them to remember what he taught them and try to hunt carefully. They ask him if he is coming, and he says he will join them once he is done with his workout. The ghouls wish him luck as he begins his workout, and they leave. Hansel says the rocks are light and wonders if he should have come with Ghoul Lord. The ghouls warm up in the woods and says they have bodies that can defeat the cooks. One says things will become dangerous if the cooks evolve, and the others think he suggests they work out and go home. The ghoul corrects him and says Hansel didn't mention the conditions to win the battle. He says Hansel caught 27 cooks and suggests they catch 50 by spreading out. The ghouls like his idea and run into the woods as they begin their hunt. Meanwhile, Leaper, Hendard, and Blog arrive at the Kotatra skeleton, and Hendard said its head was destroyed by high-class magic because it is nowhere to be found. Blog wonders who is strong enough to kill the Katatrus with a single attack. The trio hears a strange noise from the woods and prepares for battle. They see several cooks emerge from the bushes and the ghouls attack the cooks. The trio prepares to attack the ghouls as they say they have never encountered them, but the ghouls stop and say humans are brutal and like to slaughter. The ghouls begin to flex their chest as they call the first and second teams, but the cooks see it and get excited. They evolve because of the excitement and the ghouls say they are doomed. The leaders of the teams 2 and 3 arrive using a technique they learned from Hansel. They remember his advice on good posture and how they can have help when they need to maintain a good posture. They use accessory muscle bench presses to crush the cooks' skulls. They successfully defeat some cooks, but a ghoul is left without partners. The cooks prepare to attack the ghoul, but the warriors help him and they defeat the cook. They work together to defeat their enemy, but a giant cook arrives and is furious at the ghouls and the warriors. The end. Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos and make sure to subscribe and tap the bell to be notified about our latest videos. See you next time.